Okay, so today is Wednesday, November the 9th, 2022. My name is Huijun Mao, and I'm here with Miss Nabila Mansour for the Houston Asian American Archives at Rice. So now we're gonna get started. And so first question is, when and where were you born?
So I was born in Toronto, Canada. And did you say when I was born?
Yes.
So 1976. And I was the daughter of two immigrants from Pakistan.
Cool, cool, cool. Can you describe the neighborhood you grew up in?
Sure. So I was born in, I said Toronto, but it was actually a suburb of Toronto, Mississauga, and reminds me of kind of where I live right now, here in Houston, to some degree. But I grew up in a place called Brampton, Ontario, and it had a lot of South Asians there. It was a very South Asian heavy city. So went to school, went to high school, and then went to University of Toronto, all in Toronto up until I was 22. And it was a community that had was very diverse, very multicultural, and so grew up with a lot of people that were very from a lot of different places.
Can you share some like memorable events during childhood that have it?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Yeah, it was a great way to be raised. Again, I mentioned like it was really diverse. But one thing that was really particular to my neighborhood was it was very diverse with a lot of South Asians. So there were people from India and Bangladesh and Pakistan, and we we all had a really good time growing up in terms of getting to know each other and grow up together. So we would put on a lot of cultural shows. We'd have cultural day in school, and we would wear our like outfits to school. So it was a really interesting time to be, as Canada was really changing very quickly. So yeah, it was really good. I'm trying to think of some other memories. We had really good places to eat. But there was always and this isn't a good memory, this is really a bad one. There was always streaks of racism. So that was very prevalent even when we were growing up from a young age. So in our neighborhood, even though it was very diverse, you would often have people that would single you out. And if things didn't go well, they would perhaps call you, certain names. And so I remember um, being bullied at a young age and being called a packy. That was the word that they would use. And it was really derogatory. And this is like really young, like I'm talking like grade school. So it was even though it was a really diverse neighborhood, and maybe because it was changing so fast, there was also in turn a lot of negativity that kind of came our way, especially folks that kind of look like me. But having said that, those were, few and far between. They weren't the norm, but it was just something that we had to be really aware of. But it was a place where, um, for the most part, people lived well together. And it was cold. I just remember Toronto being very cold in the winter. So winters were brutal, and we just would. I just remember the really, really cold winters. I know everyone complains about Houston heat, but I'm like, I've seen the other side. I really appreciate warm weather.
Yeah, I'm also a warm weather lover because I'm also from the South. So can you introduce your family a bit more in details? Like what your parents' occupations?
Yes. So my mom was a homemaker, and my dad actually ran an ethnic media newspaper and TV show and radio show. So we were really steeped in the Pakistani culture. So those are really big things for us. It was really important to my dad that we know we were Canadian, but of Pakistani descent. So celebrate like the Pakistan Day, Independence Day. parades in downtown. We used to take a lot of trips back home in the summers. And my mom and my dad would put together these radio shows and TV shows and newspaper, and that was really their business, to showcase and provide news from back home to the diaspora that was living in Toronto at that time. So it was a very active childhood. We used to go to a lot of parties and events on the weekend. We used to have a lot of different outfits that we needed to wear because we used to go to so many events, like Pakistani outfits. But it was a fun, way of living. My dad also used to bring Pakistani artists from back home and do shows with them. So like, there'd be big events where people from our community would come and listen to singers and so forth. So it was really exciting to be part of that and to have a really good learning from our culture. So because of that, we speak very good Urdu because we grew up speaking it at home. It was really important to my parents that they will always say, you're going to learn English no matter what, but it's more important that you learn Urdu. So we were only allowed to speak Urdu at home. And when we used to go back home, my dad would make us take lessons with a tutor so that we could read and write Urdu. So it was very, very important for us to keep those, that part of their culture alive. And at the time we didn't really appreciate it, but I think as you get older, you're like, oh, that was good because we're able to converse with our older generation in a way that oftentimes many second generation immigrants cannot.
So it seems like your parents really have a big influence on you in terms of like your future career choice and also of your own cultural values.
Yes, for sure, for sure. It's very, very important. Like always, like you're Canadian. It's very important that you're Canadian, but you have to remember you also have this kind of Pakistani background and roots and values, and to bring that with you. So that was steeped into us from a very, very young age.
Do you have any siblings in the family?
I do. I do. So we're a family of 4 kids, and I'm the eldest. And then I have a sister who is 18 months younger than me. And then I have a brother who is 6 years younger than me. And then we had the bonus baby. Sometimes families have that. So she's 17 years younger than me. So it's 3 girls and a boy. And we're all actually, my brother is not married, but all 3 of us sisters are married and have kids or my youngest now is actually, youngest sibling is actually expecting. So I still go back in the summers. Like I like to spend my summers over there because the summers here tend to be a little bit more brutal and they're very nice and lovely up in Toronto. So I'll try to go for 2 or 3 weeks with my kids to make sure that they get a chance to spend time with, our family. And usually in the winter, because our winters tend to be milder, my family will come visit me in December during the break, which kind of makes sense. So yeah, so they're active, married, have their own lives. My sister is a teacher, the one that's 18 months younger than me. And my brother is works in IT for Microsoft. And then I have my youngest sister is an attorney. And so she works for the federal government over there.
Do you have any faith or religion while growing up?
Yeah, so we grew up Muslim. That was also a big part of our growing up. And we, used to go to the mosque and used to go to like Islamic school, like those are like after school programs or weekend programs for kids to learn our education, like our kind of religious education. And so that was a big part of growing up. Again, we didn't really like it when we were there, but I think in hindsight, it was really important because it gave us the basis for our learning. But I think I really found really grew into my Muslim community, not in Toronto, but moving here to Houston, where, after I moved and got married and came here, found people that were doing really good work kind of within the faith community and wanted to get involved and kind of sparked my interest and really blossomed like when I moved here.
So, and earlier you were saying you define yourself as Canadian with a Pakistan heritage. Is that how you define your like ethnicity? Or
Yeah, so things have changed, right? So I'm not in Canada anymore. I moved here. Um, and I really have become rooted here. And so obviously, I'll always be Canadian at heart, but I certainly want to be involved where I'm at and make a difference where I'm at. So I do identify myself as American now because I am American. And my Pakistani heritage is really important to me. So Pakistani American is something I really identify myself with. But I think also what I found, and this happened when I was here in Houston, and I started doing more kind of civic engagement work, is this idea of being Asian American. So, I never saw myself as Asian American, like, frankly. Um, but once I started doing a lot of work within the civic engagement space and saw that the government kind of has lumped all of us from East Asia and South Asia together under this, AAPI, Asian American label. At first it was kind of counterintuitive because I was like, well, what do I have in common with people from East Asia? I'm Pakistani, they're Chinese American, they're Korean American. What has that got to do with anything? But once I saw kind of, even though it's kind of an arbitrary label that's been put on, there is value in it, right? And that value comes with us kind of working together as a community and flexing our political muscle or flexing our social muscle or flexing our civic muscle, right? So our numbers are greater if we do it. And even though it struck me as counterintuitive, there was something about coming from this background from Asia that still had a lot of commonality, even though on the surface it might not look that way. So oddly enough, I feel like I identify most as an API Asian American now, because I see the value in it. And I think there is something special about coming from that part of the world. And there's something that crosses those vast borders that does unite us. And maybe it's coming from cultures that are rooted in family and tradition, and certain values. But it works for some odd reason. And so that's how I think I see myself now.
So after coming to the US, moving to the US and becoming US citizens, I see you have the culture from the Canada, and then you're now encountering with the US culture. And at the same time, you also have your Pakistan heritage. Like, how do you reconcile all those culture influence that are put upon you, and do you still observe like tradition from from your childhood or from your own culture?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I consider myself really lucky. And that's because, there's so many different places and things that I can kind of feel like I can call home and they exert their influence on us. And hopefully we take just the best of everything and make something really new and special. And that's kind of what the experiment of America is, right? Like it's like all of us coming together and trying to just work through all our messiness and come up with something really beautiful. And that's the way I look at Houston, and that's the way I look at my background. So I'm very progressive. I come from Canada, but sometimes I'm in Texas and I'm just like, what am I doing here? When I see, even now I've been here for many years, but like when I see billboards with the gun shows and things like that on it, it just still like strikes something in my heart. Like this is just strange. Um, but there's also something about being in Texas that is really welcoming and open. There's something really true about that Southern hospitality that is really, I don't know, it's very welcoming, and it's very welcoming to newcomers. And so is it hard? I don't know. I think what it is, it's just uh, trying to really come up with the best mix from all of those different underlying parts. So I'm very progressive, and I think that probably has something to do with my Canadian past. Um, I'm yes, very traditional in the sense that I want my children to also uh be privy to some of those really cool things that I grew up with, like the food, the clothes, the songs. So we do practice that at home. My faith is very important for me to me. Obviously, I wear a hijab, so very much involved in my local mosque, and I want my family as well to be following in those footsteps. But there's something really amazing about America and Houston. And so I'm very, very much involved in the political process here, trying to make a difference, trying to make some change. Um, there's a lot I love about Texas. There's a lot I love about, the place I live, but I also see that there's a lot of potential here that we're not reaching. And to me, I almost feel like we can get there if we can just kind of get everyone involved. And to that end, that's kind of been what I've been interested in, is how do we bring our communities forward and get them to be, how do we get them to activate their citizenship a little bit more? And then how do we, what does that mean? Like, how, if we were to all of us really be involved in our local communities, what would that look like? What would that mean for us? And I think what that means for us is that we'd have communities that are really empowered and engaged and active, and part of, everyday, kind of all the levers of power in the city. And we can really work towards making this place better, because we know there are problems. We know that, you know, Uvalde wasn't that long ago. School children are dying of guns. We know that abortion is outlawed in the state now for all intents purposes. And there's a lot of problems in Texas, but I think they're happening not because that's what Texans want. I think it's because just there's a lot of apathy, and people are really busy with their everyday lives. And they're trying to put food on the table. They're trying to go to school like you. They're, doing all of their things. They don't have time to really think about it. What is it that we can do to kind of get folks to understand how important it is to become more involved?
That's certainly very great. I mean, speech about Texas and Houston and what you're trying to achieve in a in a place that wasn't really your original home. And
Thank you for saying that.
I think that is really moving and really insightful for us who are also not original Americans.
Mm-hmm.
So you said you went to a University of Toronto as an undergrad. What year was that?
I'm very old. So I went, I should know this. I graduated in 98. So I started in 95 and I graduated in 98.
So thinking back to your undergrad college life, what were some like defining moments that you had that have influence on your future career?
Yeah, undergrad was really busy. I almost feel like my undergrad, I wish I could go back and talk to myself, because I actually wasn't very involved in undergrad. I guess most people do find their claim, but I was so interested and worried about getting good grades and stuff that I was really concentrating on my work. And I wasn't that involved in student organizations other than here and there. So my undergrad was kind of just, I did my 4 years in 3 years. I was trying to get all my coursework done and just get through it. So I had really good time with my friends, but not anything that really uh, told me or gave me an inkling of what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to go to law school. Kind of that was my big, kind of big picture. But it was more like just you have to do something after undergrad. So I was just that's what I was gonna do. So I look back at that kind of time. I'm like, I should have been more thoughtful and intentional, but in reality, I just wasn't. And and I hope that other students weren't like me. Like I work with a lot of young students now, and I'm like, we need to do this, we need to do this. But in all reality, when I was an undergrad, I was really just concerned about making sure that my grades were good and that I was trying to get through school and so forth. So yeah, it was a good time, but I don't think it was a pivotal time. I think my calling and all of that happened in Houston.
So which law school did you go? And
Yeah. 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 So after I graduated from college, I did I met my husband. Well, I met him while I was in college. But I got married and moved to Houston with him. He was from Houston, and we decided to live here because he had a job and I didn't. And then when I came here, I applied to law school and ended up going to University of Houston Law Center. Uh, and I think that's when I really started meeting a whole new group of people. Did not like Houston in the beginning. I was very homesick that first year. I remember crying myself to sleep at night because I wanted to go back home. But when you don't have friends and you don't know anybody, it can be very lonely. But once you start going to school and start making friends and start meeting people, um, it changes, right? So once I started getting to know the community here and I guess really found my tribe, right? Like found folks that were like me. All of a sudden, this became a really exciting place to be. And I think in law school, I really decided that whatever I was going to practice, it was going to be in the nonprofit realm. And so I did my summers at nonprofits like Lone Star Legal Aid. I think they were called something else when I was there, but I worked at nonprofits. I did work at some one summer I did spend at a law firm, but I knew that that was where I wanted to be. And then once I graduated from law school, um, I had my first daughter, and so I really didn't practice law for very long. I took some time off, and that's when I really, I was at home with my kids. I wasn't working. I had two kids back to back, and at that point, really wanted to get involved in the community. And so in the beginning, it kind of looked like just getting involved in my kids' school on the PTA or whatever. And then from there, learning about like, oh, what's a precinct chair? Like, what does that mean? And I remember it was the Obama election, the first one. And I had just become a citizen at that point. So I had never voted before in America, not back home, but here I hadn't voted. I couldn't. I became a citizen. I got really excited about the election and decided to cast my vote. And then said, oh, you should get involved in the Democratic Party. Well, I don't know how to get involved in the Democratic Party. Okay, what is that? And then you kind of just learn from, okay, what is it we can do? And then they get you and then you get involved and then you can get really involved. And I really found that I wanted to make a difference. And I'm always kind of proud. Like now, there's a lot of people in my community that are involved in politics. But when I was getting involved in politics, there were not a lot of people. There weren't a lot of Democrats at all. So I live in Fort Bend County. I live in a city called Sugar Land. It's a very, very high Asian American population. Um, but when I was getting involved in like 2012, like in party politics, there weren't that many Asians involved. There weren't that many people involved because no one really thought Democrats could win. But really got to know some people um, And that was kind of my political awakening, was law school and then taking some time off and still wanting to do something, even though I was at home, and getting involved.
Well, it's good to hear about your whole process of realizing what you want to do in the end. That's very enlightening, I think, to later generations as well. So I see that you've had working in the Mgage Texas chapter before. Can you describe your experience working in that and uh what does that look like?
Yeah, so I was my daughter went to an Islamic school here. It was a faith-based school. Or my daughter, all my kids, not just my eldest, all of them went to this school called Ilm Academy. It's out on I-10 and I-10 in Memorial area. And I was on the board for that school. And my one of our board members, my colleague, his name is AJ Durrani. He was starting a chapter here in Texas for Mgage, and I didn't know what Mgage was. And then he explained to me that it was an organization that is working to empower Muslim Americans. And I had been, taken now quite a few years off, and practiced a little bit of law in between there, here and there, but really hadn't done anything full time. And was very interested in politics anyways. It just seemed like the best fit. So, talked to AJ and talked to some other people and thought this was a really good project to get involved in because there just wasn't anything being done like that, especially in the Muslim American space, where there was a concerted effort to try to get people to, and we were a C3 back then, to find out about voting, registering to vote, um, trying to make sure that they knew that elections were happening, um, going to mosques and doing voter registration drives, um, and just doing political education, right? Like explaining what is a primary, what does a general election look like. Um, so that was really great. That was my first job, and I don't think I really knew what I was doing in the beginning. But we would just do stuff. We would just try. We're like, oh, let's do a candidate forum. We'll just invite all the candidates, invite our community, and see how it goes. And when we invited them, so many candidates came, and so many people came, and so we just did it. And then we're like, okay, maybe we shouldn't invite like 50 candidates next time. Maybe we should like kind of do it a little bit more differently and invite this many candidates from these races that are important. And then maybe we can get our young people to ask them questions at this candidate forum. There's a Houston City Council race happening. Let's invite all the mayoral candidates and have our young community members have them ask questions that are important to them because they're going to be living in the city. So it was really fun, exciting. It was launching a new group right off the ground. And we didn't really have a lot of money. We didn't have a lot of resources, but I think we made a big dent. We were able to do a youth leadership program, and take college age students and help them become more civically engaged. We were able to register, like just doing like a weekly voter registration drive on a Friday for like the whole year, or doing it at our Eid prayers, which is our big celebration. We were really able to make a difference. And so really proud of my time there. And then we had a C3, we had like a nonpartisan wing, then we had a PAC, and then we were able to even do 501c4 work, which is partisan advocacy, and got to know a lot of other activists on the ground and work with them.
So what are the members of Mgage primarily comprised of, and are they all like Muslim Americans?
Yeah, so the way we looked at it, we use the terminology Massa, Muslim, Arab, South Asians. That was kind of our target, audience. And we were able to really make a difference here in Houston because there is such a huge community. And then we grew to Texas, so we have a chapter in Austin and Dallas as well. because that's really primarily where the Massa community resides, and really just making sure that they're they're using their power in numbers to make a difference in elections. And the Massa community has grown in such a way that they can really exert influence in certain areas and pockets where they live. So making sure that they know about that, and trying to get candidates to run or support candidates from that community. Those are some of the things that we were doing.
Have Mgage like ever collaborated with other organizations like in representing the voice of the ethnic groups? And in what
Yeah,
manner?
it was very important to us that we work in collaboration with other groups, especially Asian American groups. So it was during that time that we started um, ECI, which is the Empowering Communities Initiative. Worked together with, it was a table basically, or collaborative with the other Asian American organizations in the city, such as OCA Greater Houston, Chinese Community Center, BPSOS, VN Teamwork, um, JACL, the Japanese American Citizen League. We worked with an umbrella group called Houston in Action, and kind of all of the members that are part of that particular group. So we did a lot in collaboration with them, and that could be in the form of candidate forums, like I mentioned. That could be in the form of block walking field campaigns, phone banking, text banking, anything that we could do together to make sure that our community members knew that there were important elections coming along. We were very active in the census during 2020. And then once COVID hit, it really forced us to rethink our programming because all of a sudden we couldn't go out the way we used to. So we started thinking of really creative ways that we could get the word out to the community, and really got involved in COVID vaccine campaign as well, to ensure that our community members knew, where to get a vaccine and how to get it and the importance of it, and kind of dispel some of the misinformation that was going out. Because, misinformation is a big problem in the Asian American community. I know in East Asian communities, it's Chinese communities, it's the WeChat. With us, it's WhatsApp. WhatsApp, you can just forward all this stuff, and some of it is not good information. So working with other groups to make sure that we were getting the right information out, or dispelling misinformation that was coming out.
Yeah, well, that's a lot of work, and I'm really glad that you're still pandemic doesn't hinder your progress on representing helping the ethnic group. And then so after Mgage, I see that you're also involved in ECI, right? ECI's 2020 Census Initiative. Can you
Yes.
introduce about that, and what is that about?
Yeah, and that was really, I mentioned it earlier, it was trying to make sure that the Asian American community, we were reaching out to all the trusted messengers within the Asian American community, make sure that their particular constituencies knew about census, because it was very imperative that all of us take part in the census. And if you remember, 2020 was a really interesting year. We had the pandemic, we had the census, and we had a big election going on, right? It was like a huge one. And if you remember, Trump was the president, and he was really spreading a lot of anti-Asian hate. He was calling it the China virus. The hate crimes against Asians were going up. And there was a lot of threats going on about how possibly the census could be used against our communities. There was a real weaponization of the census. So people were scared. You're asking me to answer all of these questions, and I'm not here legally. I'm here illegally, or I'm a refugee. What if this information is used against me? What if it's used to deport me? Or what if it's not used to deport me, but it's used to deport my uncle who's living in my house, who is overstayed his visa, whatever. The possibilities were endless, right? So there was a real hesitancy in the Asian American community to answer the questions. Of course, the census that information is confidential and is not used against the residents. And if whether you're a citizen or not a citizen, everyone needs to answer the census. So a lot of the members of the Asian American community are new. Maybe they just came, the last time the census happened was 10 years ago. So they weren't here for the last census. They have no idea what it is. It might not be in the language that they're comfortable with. Maybe they don't speak English, they don't write English. How do we make sure that our community members are answering the census, responding to it, and are taking part in it in a way that will allow us to be counted? We want everyone to count, and that includes everyone from every community. And so doing outreach work within the Asian American communities, meeting with faith leaders, community leaders, civic organizations, convincing them to include census messaging in their emails or their social media, doing census pledge cards at community events and fairs, getting the word out that the census is not something to be scared of, all in the midst of a pandemic where we weren't really comfortable going outside in big crowds because the vaccine wasn't there yet. So it was an interesting time, but we came up with really, really creative ways to deal with it.
Okay. So we were just talking about the census initiative, and you're talking about, I think you've devised many innovative ways to get people know about the census, and then urge them to participate in it so that they're not afraid, so that they're not afraid of it, right?
Yeah, and it was really just making sure that we had messaging that worked with each particular community. So, so again, working with the community leaders, working with the ethnic media landscape, just trying to get the word out. And so it was, we had to be a little bit more creative in terms of how we got the word out. For example, there were long lines at food banks, and those food banks in areas that were in heavily AAPI areas, Asian American areas, we would kind of be there and give out, census literature. We were just everywhere that we needed to be to try to find out how we can utilize this particular moment to make sure we were getting as much information out to our community as possible. And to that end, I think obviously we probably didn't hit 100% or anything, but we did make a difference because I know we were very active in Fort Bend because Fort Bend has a really high AAPI population, and we had the highest response rate for the census in the state of Texas. And I'm sure it had a lot to do with the efforts that some of our organizations that were doing the work on the ground and making sure that people knew about it had.
So it seems like it's really like a big collaborations between a lot of organizations and communities. And I was wondering, in what areas have you like collaborated with other organizations, and what organizations are them, or what communities are them?
Yeah, some of the same ones I mentioned before. It's working with the Asian American groups, but even the Latinx and Black groups through Houston in Action, our work. I know because it was a pandemic, we even utilized phone banking the way we do during elections, calling on, seniors, checking if they knew if they were okay, checking in on if they were doing okay during the pandemic, and then also asking, have you heard about the census? And helping them complete the census. So it was really just trying to use all the tools in the toolbox that we had to make sure that our communities knew, and working in collaboration with a lot of the other groups through umbrella organizations like Houston in Action, ECI, places like that, where we could all come together, exchange ideas as to what it is we're doing, talk about our best practices, and then work together if we had to, or learn from each other at least on what works best in each community.
So how big a support team you have in doing for the working for the census initiative?
Yeah, we had a couple of people, three or four, but a lot of it was just volunteer power and then working with other organizations. We're able to oftentimes get, at least 4 or 5 people to come out to an event and man a table or get on the radio and talk to, the community. So it was really just, but there were just 3 people, 4 people on staff.
Oh, wow, that is very impressive work that four people have done.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't just us, it was like a lot of other organizations in Houston, but all of us kind of collectively were able to make a difference.
so after the, I see on your, uh, I see on your info that after the MGage, you go on to work for Rice API, and then
Yeah, so thank you for asking. So I was with Engage for many number of years. And sometimes you get to a point where you want to try something different. You've been doing it for a while. And because of my work on the ground with other Asian American organizations, I really got to know the other activists, organizers in the city, got involved with a couple of people that were talking about starting a 501(c)(4). Now, 501(c)(4) is really different than a C3. 501(c)(3) is a nonpartisan nonprofit, but a 501(c)(4) is a nonprofit, but it can be partisan. By being partisan, what I mean to say is they can actually advocate for politically and take sides, right? So they can advocate for progressives, or they could advocate for Republicans. They could advocate for whoever. But I was very much involved with making sure that I wanted to see a change. I wanted to register a voter, and then I wanted to tell them who to vote for. I didn't want to just stop at the voter registration part. And that was very appealing to me. And so there were a group of organizers that got together. There is a group in downtown DC, in DC, called AAPI Victory Alliance, and they're working to empower Asian Americans really all across the country. And Texas was in there on their radar because Texas has one of the highest populations of AAPIs in the country. In fact, we have um, the fastest growing AAPI population here in Texas. And out of all the ethnicities happening that reside in Texas, AAPIs are the fastest growing racial demographic. And so we make up almost 6% of the population right now. But we're growing really quickly. And we're going to be 10% of the population in, 10 years or so. What do we do now in this moment to make sure that our Asian American community is empowered? What do we do now to make sure that our Asian American community is involved and is taking part in turning Texas blue and making it more progressive? And that was something that was so appealing to me, right? Like, to coming from really a C3, which is a nonpartisan background. Um, I know how important it is, but I know there are certain limitations. And to have the freedom to be able to advocate aggressively for progressive policies was so liberating for me. And so after meeting some of the people that were originally part of this idea of starting Rise AAPI, really wanted to be a part of it. And yeah, one thing led to another, and we launched in June. And this was our first election cycle. And we have a couple of things we want to do. We want to make sure that we have the right narrative in place within the Asian American community, such that our community members are thinking in a progressive manner. So for example, this election cycle, we have a very vibrant ethnic media landscape here in Texas. So we worked with them to make sure that we had progressive ads out, telling our messaging on why it's important to vote for Democratic candidates, but in messaging that is relevant and resonant to those communities. So what works in the Vietnamese communities might not necessarily work in the Pakistani community might not necessarily work in the Korean community, right? So to have an understanding of who is actually doing this work on the ground and then working with them to come up with content that would appeal to our particular sub-ethnicities and make them wanting to vote. So we're not telling them, oh, there's just an election around the corner. We're saying there's an election around the corner and this is why you should vote for this person. We wanted to make sure that our Asian American candidates were uplifted and supported. There were a record number of AAPI candidates running in this particular election cycle. We had 28 or 29. Let me check. We had, it's just writing this down this morning. So give me just 1 second. I think we had 28 candidates running that were AAPI in this particular election cycle. And 17 of them have won. One of them is in a runoff. Zohaib Qadri out in Austin will now be in a runoff for city council election. And we have one Asian American candidate in Fort Bend County who's running for judge, but it hasn't been called yet. It's like a difference of like 50 votes. So we haven't called that election yet, but it's looking like he's leading. So we'll have 18 candidates that will win elections in Texas. And this is with our communities just doing this work on the ground, on their own, in their own silos. There really hasn't been an effort to collaborate or have conversations between the different sub-ethnicities in our communities. There hasn't really been any effort at a strategy that looks towards collaboratively working together to make sure our communities come out and really work towards figuring out how best we do this organizing work that is so important. So so to that end, we're very excited. It was our first election cycle. You know, we've made a C4 table where we've invited the Asian American organizations that are doing this work on the ground in the partisan space to come together and meet with each other like every 2 months or so and talk about what they're doing and talk about the needs that need to be filled and the gaps where we can come in and help. So that's kind of one aspect of it. We're working on a voter file that will be able to better identify our community members. It's a big issue in the Asian American community. The voter files that most of the political groups use, not very good at identifying Asian Americans, if they even do identify them. Oftentimes they're misidentified. So we don't really know how many Asian Americans there are other than from the census, but we don't have no way of contacting them. So I think it's important that us as Asian Americans start doing that work because frankly, no one else will. And so we need to start working on making sure we have a voter file that identifies our groups. And then hopefully even identifies what first generation, second generation is, right? Because there's a big difference from immigrants that are coming straight from these countries back home and people that were born here and raised here. And that messaging would look different to those two groups, very possibly based on their age and where they were born. So that's all information. That's all stuff that needs to be done and hasn't been done in Texas. Is something that we think we can come in and help and really do a landscape analysis of what the Asian American community, looks like. We want to support our Asian American candidates. We want to have a recruit and run program at some point, not right now, but at some point, where we want Asian Americans to run at every level of political office. And if there isn't one, we want to be able to find them, train them, and get them into the pipeline. So that's probably not going to happen in 2023, but we're hoping it'll happen in 2024. We have some big elections coming up next year. The Houston mayoral election is a big one. I think all eyes are going to be on that particular race. And what does that mean for the Asian American community in Houston? Are there AAPI candidates running? And if not, who are the ones that are running that are most amenable and listening to our community's concerns? So, a lot of other programs I could go on, about some of the other things we're doing, but that is really kind of the goal of our organization is to empower our community, to educate our community, and to turn Texas blue finally.
Yeah, that's a very ambitious goal, and that I can see you've done a lot of things. You're really trying to do more things. And at the same time, I was wondering like how big a support team you have in having all those goals standing in front of you.
Yeah, so we're a new organization, so it's back to just me right now. So we have a volunteer base. We have a really active board membership with that is really comprised of the community leaders as well as the elected officials, right? So all of the AAPI elected officials are part of our advisory board, and we just got some new ones in. So we are going to have two new Asian Americans joining the Texas legislative body. They just won yesterday. We had a big election yesterday. So we're going to have Dr. Salman Lalani here in Houston and Dr. Salman Bajani out in Dallas. Newest members of the AAPI caucus. Representative Jean Wu, Representative Hubert Vo are on our advisory committee. We won big in San Antonio with County Judge Peter Sakai, Japanese American. He is now the county judge of San Antonio. I'm sorry, of the county. And we have KP George, who won re-election out in Fort Bend County, who is also on our advisory board. So we're in touch with them. And we hire consultants when we need it, to help us do some of this work. And we look to our volunteers and our board members to help us put together some of this. And, again, it was our first election cycle. So we wanted to make sure that our goals were doable, achievable. But we want to get to the point where we want a goal to be like, we're going to increase Asian American turnout by 2% in this election and be able to actually work towards that. So we have big plans. And I think as our community grows, this work will be more and more important.
So what are the members of Rice AAPI primarily comprised of? Are there people like outside of the communities but want to join?
That's a really great question. So I mentioned like we're right now a staff of one, but we've had fellows and student interns from other organizations. We had a really wonderful fellow named Lauren Nguyen from Pivot, and that's a Vietnamese group. She was with us until yesterday, until like election day. And then one of my superstar volunteers, her name is Wendy Wilkinson. She helps me run my social media. She's a American white woman, and she just sees the importance of this work. So our membership crosses all, diversities and backgrounds. What I'm very proud of is our board. Like I mentioned, the AAPI community is really huge, right? It covers a lot of different ethnicities. And we wanted my board, who I really look to for advice and help, to come from all of those different ethnicities. So we have a lot of members of the community, and I'm sure some of them are going to be part of this project as well, that have been doing this work for a very, very long time. They're really the community leaders. Or they're really active young activists that are doing this work right now and are kind of at the forefront of organizing. So we have Rogine Calvert. She is our board chair. Mustafa Tamiz, he's on our finance council. And I'm just off the top of my head, I'm just telling you the folks that are involved. David Lee, he was a senior advisor to the Beto campaign. He is on our finance council. Nicolette Ardiente, a young Filipino American out in San Antonio. Ashley Chang out in Austin, doing really great work with Asian Texans for Justice. Who else? I mean, we have a whole host. I'm just trying to think off the top of my Gordon Kwan, the first Asian American city councilman. Varun Nikor from AAPI Victory Alliance also sits on our board to make sure that the connection is with us and Victory Alliance stays. AJ Durrani, my old friend from Engage, is on our board. Swati Joshi, she's with a group called Desi Blue. And she is on our board as well. So we kind of cover Korean, Chinese, Taiwanese. Helen Shi, very active, grassroots work. She's on our board. Um, the main players that have been doing this work for a long time sit on our board and help us kind of navigate how it is best to do this work. And so they've been a really wonderful resource for us as we've launched this organization.
Wow, it's really amazing to hear about all those people like coming from everywhere and joining the RISE API. And I'm really hoping that we will see big progress being made in the future.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll have to get you involved too.
Sure, sure. And I see that you're also a board member of the Fort Bend ISD. Is it like an elected person?
Oh,
Or
no, I'm sorry. That was it's not Fort Bend ISD, it's the Fort Bend LID. So the LID board is just a local government entity. It is called the Levee Improvement District. And it is an appointed position. So I was appointed by the county commissioner here in Fort Bend. And it has to do with the levees and parks in your particular community. So it's an important job, especially in Houston, because we live in Houston and we tend to flood. And so it's been really interesting because you have to kind of use a different part of your brain than the stuff that I'm used to using in kind of some of the organizing work that I do. But it's been really rewarding to be able to take part in maintaining the levee system in your local communities and getting to know a lot of engineers and different folks. But yeah, it's something I enjoy.
oh, so you're still doing the that kind of work right now besides RISE API.
Yes, it's a volunteer position. And it's just something I like to do to take part in our kind of local local government really on the granular level, because this is stuff that's very neighborhood specific, right? Each neighborhood is in charge of their own levies. At least in Fort Bend, that's how we do it.
And so now we've seen a lot of the things you have accomplished and going to accomplish. And in your opinion, how well do you think the younger generation Asian Americans are prepared for like political involvement or political awareness?
So I love young people. I work with a lot of young people and I get very excited when I'm around young people. One thing, I don't know if I put that in that bio, but I'm also the president of the Asian American Democrats of Texas, which is the only officially recognized Asian American group by the Texas Democratic Party. And we've been doing this work for a while, but the folks that really get me excited are the young people that want to get involved. And so I've had a chance to work with a lot of young people here in Houston. And they are so excited. They're so good at what they do. They have such an understanding on how to use social media much more better than I would ever do it. We have this young man, David Nguyen, Vietnamese American, and Rohit Shajan, Indian American, and myself, and we put together this rally for Beto in the matter of like a week, this past election cycle. And it was not easy doing all that work, but to see them kind of take that step forward and get involved has been really heartening and exciting. And I think, the future is in good hands. When I see young people, I see the excitement and I see how committed they are and what a understanding of the political process they have in a way that I never had when I was that age. So it makes me really, really, really happy.
So are you involved in like offering lectures or workshops for younger generations?
Oh, good question. So AADT, we are going to be doing certain things in the now that this election cycle is over, we want to do like some trainings, like precinct chair trainings, like getting young people to get involved in their local areas and their neighborhoods. Eventually we probably will do some kind of recruit and run workshops, like how to be a candidate on folks trying to think that maybe they're interested in it. Maybe they had some interest, but they don't know where to start. So we have some things planned in the work. works. But we can certainly, any young person that is interested in getting involved, we can certainly point them to the right direction because we have a lot of contacts with other organizations that are doing this type of work on the ground.
So what is your view of Asian American studies in higher education and Texas K-12 curriculum?
Yeah, I mean, that's something really close to my heart. I haven't been as involved in it as much as I'd like to, but but there is a movement afoot to try to make Asian American studies part of the curriculum for K-12. And and that just seems like a no-brainer to me. I mean, if we learn about all of this other stuff, and we know that Asian Americans have made so many important important contributions to history. We know about the Japanese internment, like all of those things. Those should be part of our Asian American part of our regular curriculum. I think it's an uphill fight, but it's certainly one worth fighting for. Same with higher ed, Asian American studies. One thing I realize is it's up to us to honor our own past. It's up to us to elevate our studies. It's up to us to make sure that we are memorializing our community members, our events, our passage of time, because no one else is going to do that. And so that's why I'm so excited about this project that you are involved with. And I think it's really important as we see the face of America changing, that we have a better grasp and understanding of the many beautiful components of it. And so it's imperative that we do this. I think Houston is really a microcosm of what the future of America is going to look like. And there's still a lot of places where you will not find the type of diversity you have here. So it's important that we get it right in places like Houston and places like Harris County and Fort Bend County, because if we can get it right here, then I think we have a good chance of getting it right in the future.
So back to the Asian American Democrats of Texas. I think you're the president of AADT. And would you like to talk more about your role in AADT and some other activities or things, campaigns you're involved in?
Yeah, I mean, the Asian American Democrats of Texas, something I'm really proud of. It's the oldest organization that kind of did this political work with Asian Americans at a time where I can't even imagine what made them want to do this. And so I want to carry that legacy on. Like I mentioned, we are the officially recognized caucus. So whoever is the president and vice president actually gets to sit on the SDC, which is the SDC. What does that stand for? The Executive Committee of the Texas Democratic Party. So it comes with some, actual influence within the party. It's an important position. We advocated and wanted a seat on the DNC for many years. The AADT argued that the Asian Americans from Texas should have a seat on the DNC. There's a whole contingent from Texas that goes to the Democratic National Committee. And we said we wanted a seat. There wasn't an Asian American seat. We fought for it, we finally got it. So Ashley Chang is our current DNC member representing the Asian Americans. But that happened because we really argued and said that the time is now to have it in structure of TDP. So it goes back to making sure that our communities are feeling empowered and are having their voice heard. We asked the TDP to hire an Asian American outreach coordinator, and we raised some funding for that, and we were able to do that. So the TDP hired a full-time Asian American outreach coordinator. They wouldn't have done that if we hadn't been involved trying to push them to make that change. So all of these things happen because you keep pushing and arguing and being annoying until like they give in, right? And if we want to make sure that our voices are heard, we have to have the institutions in place. And Asian American Democrats of Texas is one of those institutions. I'm going to tell you when it was created. I should know this off the top of my head, but because it is something that was really visionary by the original 1990. It was founded in 1990 by Robert G. Gordon Kwan, Mark Lee, and Judy Lee. And they were just four people here in Houston that said, hey, we want to make sure that Democrats know that Asians are here and that they have a voice. And so to that end, it's been a really exciting process to become part of that project, right? And so we're in constant communication with our partners at the TDP, making sure that Asian Americans are part of the conversation. And we have quite a long list. Again, we work with Asian American candidates. We did a Beto rally for Asian Americans this year in Houston. And that was very exciting. There was no Asian American rally that Beto was doing. He had done a Latinx one, he had done a rally with the Black community, but not with the Asian American community. So we pushed and pushed and pushed, and we were able to make that happen. And that's really important because we want Beto to know, if he had won for governor, that there is an Asian American community here and they need to be part of your thinking moving forward. So, so that's kind of the work that we've been doing. We work to make sure that we have more Asian American Democratic precinct chairs, that our community members know about our elections and our voting, and doing that type of stuff. So we have chapters in San Antonio, in Austin, in Dallas, in North Texas, we call it, and Houston.
So you've mentioned a lot about the communities, AAPI communities and Asian American communities. I was wondering if you have set like a certain definition for the communities you're referring to. Like, is it the communities in Sugar Land or in Fort Bend County, or maybe some other definitions you've given?
Yeah, so depending on what you talk about, but actually both of them, both AADT and RISE AAPI, which I'm involved with, are both Texas based. It's just that if I sound a little Houston centric, I think it's just because a lot of the work has been done in Houston and I'm based in Houston, but we are Texas wide and we have a Texas lens because we understand that if we want to make some change, we have to activate all of those areas. We're more active in the cities because Asian Americans tend to be there more, but we do believe that there are pockets of Asian Americans in rural areas of Texas. Goes back to that voter file that we're working on. We want to make sure we're able to find those rural pockets of Asian Americans that live in the Rio Grande Valley or live in some rural part of West Texas, so that we can get the messaging to them and really start making sure that they are voting in a way that we believe is best for us, and best for everyone that lives in Texas.
And do you think yourself as a woman engaging in politics have bring you like a different perspectives in political involvement and political awareness?
Oh yeah, I mean, being a woman it's a whole nother story. I mean, it's just you oftentimes will find yourself in very male heavy spaces, and that's true for politics as well. But what I will find is that women are the ones who get stuff done. Like the women AAPI community activists that I meet, they're the ones who are actually knocking on doors and making the calls and doing the work. And I just think that women have a really good, maybe because of whatever our background, we're able to juggle a lot of different things and we can get things done. We can get things done a lot more efficiently, maybe because we oftentimes juggle our homes and our families and our careers in a way that males don't do. Yeah, I could go on about why women just get things done.
Yeah, and is there like any extra challenges you face as being a woman in politics?
Yeah, I mean, misogyny is a real thing, and that is not, uh, that is not alien to the Asian American community. So, so is it there? Yes. But is it going to stop the work that we're doing? No. It just means that we have to work a little bit more harder, and we have to uplift other women to make sure that we're making way for them, and that we are working toward making sure that when we say Asian Americans are being empowered, we mean all Asian Americans, both men and women.
And you said that women's get have the power to get a lot of things done, then that's exactly the kind of question I'm gonna ask next. How do you balance between work and family? Because I think you have more than one child, I think that's
Yes, yeah, yeah. So I have three kids. How do I balance work and family? I think you have to have a husband who really understands and is okay with you being, the type of work we do oftentimes takes place not on a regular work day, but on the evenings, in the evenings, on the weekends. So having a good partner is very, very important. And my kids are older now, so that does make it easier. But making sure that you carve out some me time. So we're coming through a really brutal election season, and I'm going to be this weekend going away for a little bit just to take some time off. So to make sure you carve out that time to recharge. But I'm a political junkie. Even on my off time, I'm on Twitter and looking at what's going on. So it is what it is. But you can't let politics permeate every single part of your life. And that's something that I'm trying to embody more than I can say I actually do. But when I'm with my friends and with my family, I do try not to always talk about politics because there's more to life than that, right? And it's really important to be in the moment, in the now, and trying to enjoy every part of your life and being present in it. And I think if you can do that, then you're off to a good start.
do you try to get your children involved in political work as well?
Yes, yes, I do. But children sometimes will want to do the exact opposite of what their parents are doing. So they're very politically astute, but they don't want to be involved in anything that I do. So I don't know what to make of that. They will get involved in their own way, but they just don't want to be involved in some of the things that maybe I'm pushing them to do. And it's probably because I'm just very pushy. But they're very, very politically aware, and they have a lot of political opinions, and we don't always agree. And I always think of myself as being very progressive. And then I hang out with my daughters and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not progressive at all. These guys are like so much um, more progressive and new ideas. And I learn a lot from them. And so yeah, I do try to get them involved.
So we know that the COVID pandemic has brought like extra challenge to Asian American communities because of the increasing like racism in the whole US. And what are your thoughts about like the work Asian Americans should do or the challenges we are looking up to like after like at this time of the year, like I would say post-pandemic time.
Yeah, I think it's electing leaders that don't use Asian Americans as a scapegoat. That's the number one thing we can do, right? We elect leaders that understand that there is nuance to these things and then don't pit communities against each other for personal power. Um, we also have to make sure that we are working hard within our own communities to combat misinformation. I think that's a real big issue. And we also have to unite and work together to combat this surge in anti-Asian hate. And that can come in all forms. I remember being in the Trump administration and they had a Muslim ban. And I know how important and good I felt when my friends from other communities came to fight against that at the airports and argue that this is not right. This is not what America is, right? There were lawyers, everyone showed up at the airport to try to work against the Muslim ban. And I expect all of us as Asian Americans and other communities to show up in solidarity with everyone else when our community members are singled out against Asian hate and some of the rhetoric that has taken place under the last administration. And so it means working together. It means educating. It means taking part in bystander trainings, bystander intervention training, so that if we see something going on, we know how to respond to it and how to help that person that is being victimized.
Um, So maybe you've already talked about this, but I was wondering what is like your plan in the next 10 years?
Oh my gosh, we have 1.5 minutes.
Oh,
So I'll be really quick. So planning next 10 years, I want to see Texas be more progressive. I want to flip the state And I want to do it in such a way that Asian Americans are empowered and are part of every single political office, has some role in every political office in some leadership position. I want to see our communities thrive. I want to see our communities um, be be a part of this state and this country in a way that we all work towards a more just and equitable society, and that we are a more just and equitable society when we look back at this conversation in 10 years.
Voting. Okay, so I think that's all the questions I'm going to ask. Do you have any extra things that you would like to share or add?
No, I think that you did a really good job.
Thank you so much. Then really thank you for being able to do this interview with Houston Asian American Archives. And thank you so much for participation.